Good morning. I'm Worship Associate Nancy Dilts, and Reverend Karen Gustafson and I warmly welcome you to Unity Church. A few weeks ago, my husband Dan and I took the light rail to go from St. Paul to a concert in downtown Minneapolis. It was our first time riding the light rail since before the pandemic began. When we got on the train, the first thing we noticed was how dirty it was. Trash was everywhere, and it was clear it hadn't been cleaned in some time. It was an example of the employee shortages being experienced across the service industry. We went to the concert and headed back to the light rail stop at around 11 p.m. to go home. While we waited for the train, there were a number of people at the station. Some concert goers like us, including a few college students, and then other people who were clearly suffering from addiction and mental health issues, and people who were unhoused. The racial and economic disparities among the groups were clear and not lost on us. Two people began arguing as we waited, and the rest of us sort of herded into one corner, hoping it wouldn't escalate. I mother-henned two young college girls who reminded me of our daughter Grace, asking them to stand closer to us, and they were grateful for the offer of support. In this age of gun violence, it was very scary. The train finally came, and when we got on, each of the cars had multiple people who were unhoused, seeking shelter from the cold night. It was a stark illustration of the systemic crisis of poverty and homelessness in our cities. That night, my privilege was loud and clear to me, and to the others riding on the train. I recognized that I chose to ride that train for convenience. The majority of the people riding were on it because they had nowhere else to go. Dan and I talked and thought a lot about this experience, about the reality for many people in our community that is so different from our own, about the feeling of helplessness that we had. What can we do? What can I do? What would give my life the shape of justice? What would give our lives the shape of justice? Come. Let's ponder this as we worship together.
Please join me now in the responsive reading number 584. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted. We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and punctuate war. One day we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal as we seek, but a means by which to arrive at that goal. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. Each time we gather together, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is the center of this and every sacred community. We join with parents and teachers and those whose primary spiritual practice is the care of children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness and addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for family members in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world and for the people of this courageous congregation, as together we live into our longing to embody and to build the beloved community. Will you pray with me now for those we name? We celebrate the news that Unity Church member Bobby Cordano was named one of the recipients of the USA Today Woman of the Year Award. Bobby shares this recognition with the likes of Michelle Obama, Sandra Day O'Connor, and Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, to name only a few. And so we're very, very, very proud of you, Bobby. Congratulations. And we send healing energy to the father of Unity member Angela Wilcox, who was hospitalized in Michigan Thursday after a fall. Angela is grateful to be able to be with him as he is treated for 5 broken ribs and a collapsed lung. We mourn the sudden death of Carlisha Salek Weston at the age of 41. Carlisha, it was the goddaughter of Priscilla Morton. She will be missed by Sam and Priscilla and others who cared for her and about her. Her life was one of hardship, and it ended before she found a way to join fully in life and love. We also hold in love Kathy Taylor, whose husband Robert, to whom she was married for 45 years, died on Thursday after many years of battling with Parkinson's disease. And we send loving thoughts to Jackie Croteau, cousin of Sherry Knuth, as she ends her cancer treatment and focuses on palliative care. And we also hold in care today Mark Dietrich, whose brother John passed Wednesday at the end of a battle with cancer that was diagnosed in December. Let us pray. Spirit of life and love that holds us in our darkest hours and in our times of greatest hope. We rely upon your presence both to give us rest and healing and to call us to courageous action. We know that the bounty of our lives, the abundant resources that surround us, the gifts of peace and freedom and relative safety does not extend to all. Neither does the gift of good health and well-being. Grant us in our times of strength and hope the will to open our hearts and hands to our larger human family. Help us to live humbly in gratitude and service. Blessed be, and amen.
What is Hope? By Ruben Alves, Brazilian liberation theologian and poet. It is a presentiment that imagination is more real and reality less real than it looks. It is a hunch that the overwhelming brutality of facts that oppress and repress is not the last word. It is a suspicion that reality is more complex than realism wants us to believe, and that the frontiers of the possible are not determined by the limits of the actual, and that in a miraculous and unexpected way, life is preparing the creative events which will open the way to freedom and resurrection. The two, suffering and hope, live from each other. Suffering without hope produces resentment and despair. Hope without suffering creates illusions, naivete, and drunkenness. Let us plant dates, even though those who plant them will never eat them. We must live by the love of what we will never see. This is the secret discipline. It is a refusal to let the creative act be dissolved in an immediate sense experience and a stubborn commitment to the future of our grandchildren. Such disciplined love is what has given prophets, revolutionaries, and saints the courage to die for the future they envisioned. They make it their own bodies the seed of their highest hope.
Some months ago now, when service was selected as the spiritual practice theme for the month of March, in some meeting or another, I suggested that someone ought to do a sermon on the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. What a good idea, someone said. How about you? Okay, I said. I'm sure that there are many of you here who are familiar with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. I know that there are individuals in here who, over the course of even my relationship with Unity Church, have had a close association with this organization. But after I made this commitment, I realized that it had been a long time since I had anything to do with the UUSC. I had known and worked with a couple of UUSC staff folks in the 1990s when I did social justice empowerment training, but I needed to get myself up to speed, and now we have the internet. And I was able to contact people at the UUSC office who were very helpful in reminding me about the value of this organization. But what this turned out to be for me was a journey into a renewed awareness of my own relationship to the consequences of oppression and injustice. For a long time, I have associated the UUSC with its origin story. So you who have been around here for a while already know about this, but it bears repeating. It actually is an organization that is over 80 years old. It's one of the longest continuously running international social justice agencies in America. For a long time, or by 1938, Hitler's agenda to cleanse Europe of all diversity was becoming clear. In the United States, particularly, the flow of refugees to Prague's Unitarian Church included Jews, political dissidents, intellectuals, and others that were targeted by the Nazis. Excuse me. The American Unitarian Association, of course, this was a long time before the merger, asked Reverend Waitstill Sharp of Massachusetts and his wife, Martha, to visit Czechoslovakia and coordinate relief work there. The Sharps left for Europe in February of 1939, and those of you who know your history recognize what a pivotal moment that was, leaving their children, then aged 3 and 6, in the care of close friends from their congregation. At first, the Sharps' work in Prague included setting up a network of volunteers to obtain visas, passage, education, and employment for refugees. However, the situation for refugees deteriorated very, very quickly. The Gestapo would not allow the work of people like the Sharps to continue. And in July of that year, their office was closed and the furniture was thrown into the street. And still they stayed on. In August, Waitstill attended a conference in Switzerland and was not allowed to re-enter occupied Czechoslovakia. And under the threat of imminent arrest by the Gestapo, Martha fled Prague alone. The Sharps were reunited in Paris and sailed for home. But in May of 1940, Frederick May Elliott, president of the AUA, asked the Sharps to return to Europe as representative of the newly formed Unitarian Service Committee. With much of Europe now under Nazi occupation, they worked from Marseille to Free France and in Lisbon, Portugal, the last port of hope for many refugees from Nazi-occupied lands. So with the aid of a growing cadre of volunteers from the UUSC, their rescuees included the likes of Nobel laureate Otto Meyerhoff and writer Heinrich Mann, as well as hundreds of Jewish children. So in addition to being honored many years later by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel in 2006, the Sharps have been recognized by the United States Holocaust Museum and the United States House of Representatives, and many of you may have seen the documentary by Ken Burns. Good job. That chronicles their journey. But more importantly, of course, it is recognized by more than 2,000 adults and children in the United States that the Unitarian Service Committee helped to rescue from Nazi persecution. A visible symbol of their work lives on with us every day in the flaming chalice, which originated as a symbol to help refugees identify UUSC safe houses during the war, and was revised and adopted by as a symbol of the Unitarian Universalist Association, with the two intersecting circles representing Unitarian and Universalism, at the time of the merger in 1961. So today, the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, UUSC, according to its website, is now, quote, a nonprofit, non-sectarian organization advancing human rights together with an international community of grassroots partners and advocates. They focus their work on the intersecting roots of injustice to defend the rights at risk due to criminalization and systemic oppression of people based on their identity. They support self-determination and defend the rights of people displaced due to climate, conflict, or economic hardship. And they respond to humanitarian crises as partners with people whose access to aid is most limited. Striving to center the voices of people most affected by injustice, UUSC creates eye-to-eye relationships with frontline grassroots movements across the world that support marginalized communities in determining their steps for the future. Their mission advances human rights and social justice around the world, partnering with those who confront unjust power structures and mobilizing to challenge oppressive policies. Their work is grounded in the belief that all people have inherent power and dignity. So as I read this and reflected on it, it occurred to me that for many years, my most consistent connection with the UUSC has been in connection with their annual fundraiser education campaign, which some of you may know as Guest at Our Table. Episodically, between 1987 and 1993, when I still had children in my house, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, my family and other families in the church got a little printed box. Any of you remember this? Any of you do Guest at Your Table? And we put it on the dining room table. This was so long ago that we actually ate dinner together every night. We would set an extra place at our table with a placemat and a napkin. The rest of us had that too, but this seemed kind of fun. The literature which accompanied this little box included stories of real people who represented our partners being supported by the UUSC. We would read the stories aloud about the people who were starting libraries or helping farmers with irrigation projects in what we then called the third world countries. And we would pick one of the partners and designate a per meal dollar amount to put in the box or to assign to the box as though that person were actually our guest. And after the new year, we would add up the amount and bring the box or the check for the designated total to the church and send it off to the UUSC. We did not talk about the Nazis or about oppression or why it was that we had libraries and plenty of water. I think now about that small gesture, and I wonder how we might have done a better job of reinforcing the impact of that process. Like any well-conceived educational effort, it is only as effective as the delivery system. And I confess that though I do remember writing the check and delivering the boxes, I do not remember the guests. I do not remember the forms of oppression and injustice they were facing. I do remember wondering if our contribution mattered. I do know that my children have benefited greatly from the examples of their other parents, like a beloved stepmother who is currently providing daily support for a family of Afghan refugees through her church. But we did precious little to reinforce the true message and intent behind that effort. There is no self-flagellation here, though it may sound like it. We are all good people who vote and bear witness to the suffering in the world. We are brought into awareness by Unity's ongoing relationship to mano a mano, the pilgrimages that we sponsor, and by our weekly offerings to local social justice agencies. Many of you who gather here are professionals who work daily to bind up the broken, to provide services and education and care. I can already imagine the emails accumulating in my inbox right now, taking me to task for guilting the hardworking and dedicated people who are living their values in the world, and somehow implying that this is not enough. We can't all be Martha and wait still sharp. If you are hitting send right now, I will affirm your feelings. I may also point out that each of us here has a story like the one that Nancy so generously shared this morning in her call to worship. A story that is an opportunity for reflection on our response to the complexities of injustice, both here and abroad. How often we frame injustice in terms of what is lacking or missing for others, defined in terms of the suffering of those in need. But what of the unfairness of the abundance of those of us with plenty, of safety, and freedom, and power? Can we hold the discomfort of that without judgment? Let it work on us as gently overflowing stream that wears a path through our souls over time and shapes a new response to an old issue, that generates in us a creative spirit that helps us to recognize that some of what we are facing now is a failure of imagination. Can we put aside our guilt and our hopelessness and make room to imagine a different response? This year, the UUSC's offering as guests at our table are people I want to invite into my life, to my table, to become part of that stream that wears a new path through my soul. Ineza Umhoza Grace is amplifying the voices of youth as they petition governments around the world to take meaningful action for climate change. Zolde Sekiris is providing legal assistance and social resources for people fleeing Ukraine who are seeking safety in Hungary following the Russian invasion. Ian Zandatswix is coordinating community care for LGBTQ people recently released from the U.S. immigration detention. And Nawa Kushi is working with ethnic minorities in Burma to share their experiences of being targeted by the military junta. These are the kinds of grassroots partnerships that UUSC is supporting right now. Their stories are available on the UUSC website. They are not rescuing Jews from the Nazis. No grand gestures here, no heroics, just people engaging their imagination and their resources and their time and their talent, engaging their own double helix as their own practice of reflecting on the ways that their passions meet the needs of the world, and taking small and perhaps increasingly bold steps toward the impossible. How, we might ask ourselves, do we allow ourselves to be inspired? Where do we experience the intersection of suffering and hope? As our poet this morning reminds us, suffering without hope produces resentment and despair. Hope without suffering creates illusions, naivete, and drunkenness. I am so grateful for this opportunity to reflect with you today. If you are thinking right now, well, what does she want us to do? My response is pretty simple. Join me in the tension of discomfort. Let the unanswered and the unanswerable questions wear gently on your soul. As the Buddhists say, don't go back to sleep. Set aside your regrets and your recriminations and defensiveness that stand between you and your imagination, and grant the complexity of injustice and social responsibility a place at your table with its own placemat and napkin. The UUSC has a wonderful website. It's a great resource. Give it a look. Their message is inspiring. The injustice and crises of the past year, they say, have underscored the importance of our shared goal, a world free from oppression, where we can all realize the full human rights. They also, UUSC, emphasize just how big the task is. To meet the enormous challenge of today and build a more just future, we need big ideas and bold change. We must fundamentally transform the way things are so that we do not perpetuate systemic inequities and repeat the harms of the past. For the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. The contributions you make enable us to do the work we have pledged to do within our church community and out in the world. Each Sunday, the majority of our offering is passed on to community partners with whom we share a common cause. If you would like to nominate an organization to receive our Sunday offering, please complete the nomination form found on Unity's website. Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. As indicated in this morning's message, UUSC is a nonprofit, non-sectarian organization advancing human rights together with an international community of grassroots partners and advocates. It supports self-determination and defends the rights of people displaced due to climate, conflict, and economic hardships. The UUSC responds to humanitarian crises as partners with people whose access to aid is most limited. This collection will support the UUSC response to the earthquake impacting Turkey and Syria. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community.
Well, on a lighter note, finding ourselves at Unity. That was a nice Freudian slip. Finding yourself at Unity is offering a building tour today, and so even those of you who have been around for a while who might want to be refreshed about your building, we're meeting at the bottom of the stairs, and there will be an able and enthusiastic guide there to take you on the tour. The Unity's Artist in Residence team is inviting you to join Gino Alcock this week to help paint the murals that are being created in the religious education space on the lower level. Gino is a local artist who moved with his family from Nigeria to Brooklyn Park when he was 7 years old, and he started early developing his skills as an artist, and he never looked back. He recently gained local acclaim as the first artist of color to design St. Paul's Winter Carnival buttons. The dates and times to participate are listed in your order of service in your flyer. And anyone with an interest is invited to join. No artistic skills necessary. So we hope that you'll come and paint with Gino and the team as we seek to enliven the lower level with vibrant, colorful murals that will speak to our kids and our community. And now, will you rise in body and spirit and look in your teal hymnals for our closing hymn, number 1017, We Are Building a New Way. I close with these words from Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength is too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. And now may the peace which passes understanding, which the world can neither give nor take away, be and abide with you all. Go in peace.
Thank you. See you in a little bit.